Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Fishman-Cohen, the CEO and co-founder of iRelaunch, and I am here on the stage with two leaders of corporate return-to-work programs, Alex Mooney, who leads the Amazon Returnship Program, and Liz Marcus, who leads the Johnson & Johnson Reempower Program. And we're going to discuss the history, the features and the outlook of these programs, the impact of COVID, and at the end, I'll share a resource for employers that are contemplating launching a return-to-work program. So let's set the stage, because just to understand return-to-work programs, these are programs that target professionals who are returning to work after extended leave. Could be for childcare, elder care, or other reasons, and they're ready to return to work. And these programs have actually been around for almost 20 years and have been proliferating, though, within the last 5. And we've seen the growth happen in 3 waves. The first wave was Wall Street and financial services driven. The second wave was driven by STEM and, I'd say, tech-infused companies. And we're now witnessing the third wave as we speak, which we think will be driven by the public sector. And the very first public sector program with the state of Utah has been recently announced within the last few weeks, and we're expecting more activity there. So let's get into it. Alex, can you please start by giving us a quick synopsis of Amazon's Returnship Program?
Sure, thanks, Carol. So at Amazon, we have a 16-week paid program that is 100% virtual. We provide the IT equipment and send it to the candidate who is admitted into the returnship program. They work over the course of the 16 weeks against a set project plan, and they have quarterly performance check-ins with their manager. Each returner is assigned a mentor as well as an onboarding buddy. One of our operational tenets is support equals success, and that comes through the support of their team, their mentor, their onboarding buddy, et cetera. And at the end of the returnship, we determine how they performed, and a capstone project is presented by the returner, and those who have performed well are given an offer for full-time employment and then expected to relocate to the hiring location at that point in time, and we pay for the relocation expense.
Great, thank you. Liz, synopsis about Reignite?
Yeah, so our Reignite program at Johnson & Johnson is also 16 weeks, similar to Amazon. It is an opportunity to be hired into an organization that has a full-time role that the individual can work 16 weeks towards securing that full-time role at the end. So they work on assignments and projects. They also get mentors and peer buddies. And then at the conclusion, there's that opportunity for a full-time role. Our program is also global, with majority of our positions here in the US, but we also have a presence in countries like Ireland, Switzerland. We started growing in Latin America as well as India. So it is a program that is around the world and offered to individuals at Johnson & Johnson.
Great. Actually, Liz, that brings me to a question I wanted to ask you, because the program started very small in 2017. It started to grow in earnest when you became the head of it in 2019. And as you're saying, it's global. So my question is, how did you develop the infrastructure over time to support the global expansion?
Thank you, Carol. That's a great question. So as she mentioned, I started the program in 2018 after there was a small pilot of 3 individuals hired in one location here in the US. And when I received my opportunity to lead this program, our chief supply chain officer, who is our sponsor, said, go as big as you can. It was a little daunting of a challenge, but I accepted that challenge. And had to figure out how, as a team of one, to really grow the program in a company as large and as wide as J&J. And we looked across and we really stopped to say, well, where are our biggest champions and supporters? So that was number one. Where do we have leaders that have the energy and the roles to really grow the program? And our first country that came to me, instead of me searching them out, was Ireland. They said, we're hiring a lot of people in Ireland. We believe in this program. There's a lot of opportunity for talent returning to the workforce. And so we started with the Ireland program and a lot of test and learn. You know, when you say to leaders, we just want to do a pilot and test and learn, they're pretty more receptive to helping you test that out. And so we figured out, well, how do we find the right recruiter in the local market? How do we find the right place to advertise? So that differs globally as well. For example, in Ireland, they came to me and said, we'd like to advertise on the radio. And I'm like, who advertises on the radio anymore? But apparently in Ireland, that's a big thing. So helping the country feel empowered to launch the program as it makes most sense for them was a big success. I'm a team of one. I don't know the unique needs of India or Ireland or Switzerland. They do, and they can come to me with their proposal, and we work together on that.
Great, thank you. And I was corrected, 2018 is at the end when you joined. So that's super interesting, and I hope gives people a sense of just really the tip of the iceberg of what's involved in what you're describing. So Alex, you became the head of the Amazon Returnship program last year, and you've been driving a very aggressive expansion of the program ever since. And I want to know if you can talk a little bit about what was happening before you took on this role, and now that you've taken on this role, what have you been doing differently to fuel that expansion?
Yeah, thank you. In typical Amazon fashion, the approach that we are taking with the program now is really in reaction to our customers' needs. So we were hearing from candidates just how difficult it is to restart your career after you've had a break in employment. In fact, our candidates were using words like brutal and the uphill battle, and I thought I had to start over or think that it's an end to my career. And so in hearing the feedback from our customers, we're looking at the way our program's structured before in terms of it more or less being a recruitment opportunity. So if we post the job requisition saying, hey, if you've been unemployed for X period of time, then click apply and we'll consider your candidacy a little bit differently. And then now what we're doing is we're completely segmenting this population away from industry recruitment. And in doing that, we remove the competition between the two populations. So we actually also lowered our criteria from 2 years of unemployment to 1 year of unemployment, because while the data shows that you stand less than a 10% chance of getting an offer after 2 years of unemployment, the downhill that you face as a professional in terms of the rate of callbacks that you're getting to your applications actually begins after 1 year. And so we lowered that criteria, again, meeting our customers where they are, and then setting up our program for success to provide greater support. So rather than the old model of asking recruiters to do this as a bit of a hobby or off the side of their desk, we're now hiring recruiters who are 100% dedicated to hiring this population, and that's given us a few advantages. One being that we're now referring to our recruiters as talent agents, because they're spending more time up front coaching the candidates to interview. They've either interviewed multiple times and been rejected from other positions, or perhaps they have not interviewed in a while, and so they're prepping them, and in spending more time with the candidate, they're decreasing the time between application and the on-site interview and offer process. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, to use the phrase that you just mentioned, but we also have far more support for the managers and programmatically just how we're operating on an operational cycle to make sure that everybody is headed in the right direction.
So Alex, just to key off of something that you mentioned about the recruiters and the recruiter team, so can you talk more about how the recruiting team looks at this population, and are the conversations different? Are you recruiting based on what they did before their career break? I've seen discussion about your team recruiting for potential, and I want to know if you can talk about what were the internal conversations that led to that kind of approach from your recruiting team?
We, being a data-driven company, looked at the data, and we looked at what was happening internally with our industry recruiters and the very talented professionals that were not making it through the normal industry recruitment process, and we worked backward from there. And we said, what does the ideal candidate for a returnship look like? And so the easy answer was the unemployed population, but then what we also saw is the underemployed population. So just because somebody paused their career doesn't mean that they stop needing an income. And many of them take a survival job, is kind of the way we're referring to it, with more flexible hours, likely with lower pay, but it's not their profession that they were in before they paused their career. And so we're looking at, what did you do before and how do we help you get back there? Case in point, we're hiring for financial roles. We had a candidate who took a part-time job at Whole Foods as a Whole Foods shopper. She was away from her career for 7 years to raise her kids. Now she's ready to get back at it, and so we're trying to bring her back into the finance side of the house, Whole Foods being owned by Amazon, so we're trying to get her back into finance. But really, it's a reaction to, what do they, when you're away from your career, what are you involved in, and how is that confusing for the recruiter, and how do we clearly delineate the opportunity for the returnship program so that you as the candidate know that this is the right home for you, and that the business knows this is by design, we are hiring these professionals with this sort of profile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just add on that, some of the examples of the experiences our returners had prior to joining Johnson & Johnson's Reignite program were leaving to go join the Peace Corps, or starting their own business, like someone started a marketing consulting firm. We had a couple teachers that were engineers in their previous life, went to teach high school science, which, quite frankly, I can't imagine high school science, and rejoining the business world through Reignite. So a lot of different examples, I think, of people's experiences, and what I think the point of both of our programs and all returnship programs are welcoming and embracing those experiences that add value to these individuals, and not as a negative deterrent to, what were you doing then? You're still gaining capabilities, you're still learning to negotiate, you're still doing all of the things that we look for in those soft skills. And that should be more the theme than, oh, you weren't doing exactly X, Y, and Z, therefore you're not as capable or competent as peers in that same set.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up those scenarios, because often the business hears returnships and they equate it to somebody in their life who paused their career, most likely to raise children or care for an ailing family member, and by default, thank you, ladies, you are the ones who take on that role. And so the business managers tend to assume, okay, we're only hiring women through this program, but being an equal opportunity employer, we consider all the candidates. And so helping set expectations with the business leaders around, sure, the largest population will be women for these reasons. We also see similar scenarios where people are an expat, perhaps their spouse or partner received an opportunity abroad, they had to pause their career because they couldn't get work authorization while they lived abroad, or perhaps they are an immigrant or a refugee, and that's the reason why their career was paused and took them a while to get work authorization in the new host country. And then also the people with disabilities population, perhaps they are injured, and that's what drew them away from their career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say my husband's a stay-at-home dad, so we have to be equal to them as well.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more men. We're seeing more and more men at our events. We went from about 7% men, 93% women. Our last event was 14% men. And we are thinking maybe some of that is COVID related, and some of that is because stay-at-home dads and other roles that men have are becoming more mainstream. And so more men are doing that. So really, interesting conversation for me to hear both of you talk about essentially the eligibility rules. And I know, Liz, on the J&J Reignite site, you actually delineate different examples of what people could be doing on their career break. But I'm interested in commentary on eligibility rules in general, and how rigidly do you adhere to them? Do you say, hey, we might see an exception here and there? Because our advice to the relaunchers applying to these programs is, because there's some vagueness around it, to go ahead and apply and let the company decide whether you're eligible or not. So interested on being the receiving end of that, but what your thoughts are.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything to what Alex said, his program started at the 2-year minimum career break, which is exactly where we are. But certainly as we're evaluating the candidates and the opportunity that they had during their career break, what they were doing, certainly it is a fluid situation. Each country takes that approach uniquely as well. So I just had a conversation with India. They said, here's what we're observing in the market. do you mind if we use a different time frame to ensure we're attracting the right candidates? And absolutely, we provide that flexibility. And I think now as we're looking at those returners that were impacted by COVID, we certainly will take that approach as well. But to start, you have to have at least a minimum out there. It's not meant to be coverage for a maternity break or something like that. It's more about that longer term break that creates that barrier that we see individuals having because they have that gap on their resume.
Yeah, and for us, it really comes down to compliance. We want to instill confidence in the candidates as well as the hiring managers and interviewers that we are compliant in mitigating any sort of perception of discrimination or disparate treatment. So in our training of the interviewers and hiring managers, we emphasize it doesn't matter why they paused their career or why they're underemployed. That's not the goal of this interview. The goal is to determine, have they done it before? And if so, they're likely to be able to do it again. We, on the recruitment side, look at whether or not they meet the eligibility criteria, and the candidates that we bring forward for your interview have met that criteria, so rest assured that it's all good.
And I think the big piece Alex mentioned that we were dancing around was that they have previous experience related to the role. So a lot of times we get asked, oh, well, I was in marketing, I went back to school for human resources, can I now relaunch back into human resources? That's not really the intent of our programs. I think both of us can say that. It's really about, I was an engineer, I took a break to teach science, and now I want to come back to engineering. So it's helping delineate that, I think also helps make for a better experience for the candidate and for the employer to make sure that they're successful.
Mm-hmm. I just want to point out the milestone that it is in the whole reframing of the career break that your programs both illustrate, that originally having a career break on your resume was grounds for tossing it out, and now you have to have a career break in order to be eligible to apply for and participate in these programs, and that is a huge milestone toward normalizing career breaks. So thank you. You're starting to talk a little bit about COVID, so I want to talk about the COVID impact on both of your programs in terms of program delivery, in terms of, I know, Alex, you mentioned lowering the career break length from 2 years to 1 year. Any other impacts that you saw the COVID and that we're still going through? I don't want to say beyond COVID, we're not beyond COVID. So how has that impacted both of your programs?
So we really initially were so global and spread out that we had already created a lot of our programming virtually. So that was the first thing. We didn't have those in-person summits or events that we had to adjust. We already were planning and doing a lot of our coaching and our coffee chats and our getting to know each other virtually. So from that respect, we actually had already been set up in that world pretty well. From the hiring perspective, we continue to hire as we have needs for roles. So we continue to evaluate those organizations that are growing and have more opportunities to hire individuals and propose that they use Reignite to fill those roles. I think finally, it's really about making sure that we continue to evaluate these candidates and not the reason for their break, but their capabilities and competencies. So we just know that it's even more important that we have programs like Reignite and Amazon's Returnship to help support and encourage these individuals when they determine the time is right. So I think it just makes our program even more valuable and beneficial so that we're really prepared for these candidates that when they're ready to return.
Plus one to everything that you just mentioned. And, part of what I am enjoying about being here today and then the other press that we've received about the Returnship program is normalizing career breaks. And I think COVID will also do that in terms of just the tax that it's taken on people to, operate in this environment, or perhaps they were pushed out of the workforce because they lost their job due to COVID, whatever it might be. Maybe the kids aren't in school and therefore you're now leaving the workforce to take care of the kids. So I think normalizing the career break is one thing that we're seeing. But in terms of the way our program operates, we, by design, are offering virtual returnships for the roles that make sense to do so. We'll add additional roles in locations where it may not make sense. You have to be there physically. But by and large, the corporate opportunities are virtual. And the reason we're doing that is, again, because we're listening to our customers. And we're hearing that whatever took them away from their career is likely still a very large priority in their lives. And so we want to meet them where they are. We don't want to uproot them and ask them to relocate for a maybe. Maybe you'll get that full-time job. So over the course of the 16 weeks that you perform, you have the luxury of working from your own home. We provide the IT equipment, as I mentioned, and then, at the end of the 16 weeks, and by the way, with those quarterly performance conversations with your manager, the outcome of the returnship should not be a surprise. So if it's headed toward, hey, thumbs up, it's looking good that you'll get the full-time offer, you're also having that conversation with your family about what does it mean to relocate for Amazon when we get that full-time job, and are we prepared to do so at the end of the 4 months? So the virtual, we're asked by the hiring managers, will that continue post-pandemic? And my answer is yes, because it's the right thing to do for the candidate.
Mm-hmm. And just to clarify and speak further about this whole idea of what happens at the end of the program, because returnships are internship-based, they're reframed for the mid-career professional, but this model is very successful, and the averages we're seeing of companies that convert or hire, what percentage of people do they hire when the program completes, are approaching 85%. So we know it's a successful model. We have great data around that. And we've seen most of the company programs that get created are created around a returnship model. And we've even seen sort of a shift from it being project-based to being more role-based, and a focus more on intent to hire and the probability of hiring as opposed to the possibility.
Yeah, and to that end, to participate in our returnship, the business has to already have approval for a full-time headcount. In virtue or in doing that, they have work to be done. So we're not offering busy work. We're actually offering to place people into real scenarios where they will be doing the job. There's a lot of work to be done because it's hard to get headcount approved. And so there's no shortage of opportunity to get them squarely into the role, with also the ultimate goal of converting in role, so on the same team, doing the same job when you're full-time. We just provide that sort of time-bound opportunity for you to ramp back, brush off any rust on your technical skill sets and business acumen, and then, from there, when you're converted, you're off and running.
Yeah, exactly, and that's how we monitor our program as well. It's that support, that onboarding support, the peer mentorship, buddies that they receive, coaching and coffee chats, that really kind of is that special sauce to help the returner kind of feel included, supported, and embraced by the organization that sets it apart. The work is the work, and they're gonna be doing real work that needs to be done that they're capable and competent to do. It's really then embracing them, almost giving them like a warm hug when you join the company to allow them to really feel and regain that confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So the features of these programs are the relauncher, as we call them, having this transitional support as they're moving back into the workforce, and that could take the form of programming either in a cohort going through as a group, or sometimes individuals going through this process, but also having some pre-arranged and organized programming around that 16-week experience, in addition to mentorship and managers who have already been trained to focus on managing a person who is relaunching. So there's a lot gets put behind the programming elements, and we do a lot of this programming ourselves. And I guess one comment I will make, because virtual meant the programming that we do for companies is we now do globally, and so we were very curious about globally, do relaunchers have the same kinds of concerns, and are they excited about the same things, and how does that differ from country to country? And now that we've worked in over 13 countries, we can say with confidence that relaunchers face very similar set of circumstances and have very similar responses to them all around the world. And so that was a very interesting thing to see firsthand. Yeah.
Yeah, in that regard, going back to the comment around the recruiters being talent agents, we see a lot of the candidates expressing imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? Amazon is intimidating. I don't know if you've heard that before, maybe in the media somewhere. So coming back to work or restarting your career at Amazon in particular has proven to be a little bit daunting for some folks. And then some have actually expressed a degree of shame in the sense that they're unemployed. Questions from their family saying, why can't you get a job? You had a great job before you paused your career. And so all of that plays a factor in their ability to interview well and do well on the job. And so our talent agents are really working on that interview prep. And in fact, we've seen the time between the recruiter or between the application and the offer extended decrease when our recruiters invest more time in those candidates up front. And so, but to Carol's point, that's true globally. This is what just happens for these professionals. So there's no regional nuances that require different support for different countries. And by the way, life can happen to anybody. And so the program is not for one particular type of role. I think Johnson & Johnson has probably seen success in a variety of roles as we have at Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And we have talked about the biggest subset of the relauncher population are women who take career breaks for childcare reasons, and some of the other scenarios, which could also include military spouses and sometimes veterans who decide to take career breaks after military service. But what we have found is that for those relaunchers who took career breaks for childcare reasons, the virtual relaunch, which was really an impact of COVID because many of them were taking place in person before that. The virtual relaunch is a gentler relaunch for families. And so we've heard globally that our relaunchers who have families at home say, normally, if I was going back to work, I would be going to an office and returning to work on the same day. But because the program is virtual, I am around, even though I'm back to work, and it's kind of more of a two-step process if ultimately they're going to be going back to a physical office. So.
Yeah, in that light, I think some of the resistance that we get from the hiring managers is, will they have enough support if they're not in the office? And what COVID has done was forced everybody to rethink that notion, and we're showing that these returners are very successful. It does require more time on camera than some might prefer, but the support system is there, and all it takes is just people leaning in to help these folks ramp back to their careers.
Yeah, and I would say, we started our program, obviously, during COVID, and those returners have reached that conversion point. It's a 4-month period of a program, and I think our conversion rates have been higher than they were previously. So, it continues to ensure that the hiring manager sees the capabilities that this talent brings to them, as well as they feel included and supported and want to stay, because that returnship conclusion is an opportunity for both the candidate and the hiring manager to say yes or no. So it's just as important that the hiring manager sees the results out of the candidate, but that they also feel supported and included and at home in our organization. And so I think we're really proud that we were able to do that, through this whole virtual world. That J&J was a very in-person company before, so it was quite a difference for us, but I think we've been able to manage it.
Yeah, Amazon is a very in-person company as well, but the whole point that we drive home with the hiring managers is after they complete the returnship, that's when they go to the office and we'll pay for their relocation. So the compromise.
Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about the importance of success stories and having success stories in the public domain, not only as a motivator and instructional for the individuals who are relaunching their careers, but also for the employers and for managers who might be maybe skeptical or unfamiliar about the population. So Liz, I want to know if you could comment on that, because the J&J Reignite site has a number of success stories in all different formats, and maybe talk about how did you think about featuring those success stories, and what is your philosophy about them in terms of having them out there in the public domain?
Absolutely. That was one of the big things that I thought of when we came into the program. We only had 3 returners, but how do we let returners know that this is a safe space for them, that this is a place where they can see themselves? And the best way is for them to see others that have successfully done that. So definitely reached out to those 3 returners and said, hey, would you be willing to be part of a marketing program? Would you be willing to be recorded or tell your story in a written format? And luckily, a lot of them were open to that. And then as we gained more returners, we wanted to make sure we had global representation. We wanted to make sure we had diverse representation of different experiences and reasons. We have one of our male returners on our website as well, so that the male population could feel like this is a place for them. And I think it really helped, to your point, Carol, to show the hiring managers as well. So anytime I have, a meet and greet with an organization, I make sure I send them Monica's story or Mike's story so that they can see the success that they've had in our organization and the value they bring, as well as then, anytime we present externally at like a conference like iRelaunch, we make sure we also have an opportunity for those returners to present and be part of a panel. So I can talk, till the cows come home as far as how great Reignite is, how much I love it, how much it's an important program at J&J. But to hear, Monica or Mike tell their journey and their story, that's really the point that's important.
Totally agree. And in fact, not only the success story, but the background story. And so when we made the announcement that Amazon's going to hire 1,000 returners in the next several years, we were also featuring some of those returners and their backstory. So a gentleman named Steven had stage 4 kidney cancer, and that's what brought him away from his career. Fortunately, he beat it. Now he's working at Amazon. And we have others who, we have a phrase on our team, it's called life happens, and we believe that life is hard enough as it is. It shouldn't be so difficult to restart your career, but what life looks like is different for different people. For some, it's planned, but for others, they got thrown a curveball, and they were brought away from their career. And so helping normalize that aspect of, hey, you're not the only one to face a similar scenario, whether it's cancer or having children and raising a family, we're also helping generate awareness that those types of professionals can come restart their careers through programs like J&J's and Amazon's. But it also internally did something that was a little bit unexpected when we made the press release that we're going to hire so many returners. It got the entire company on board, to be honest, and we were overwhelmed with the sheer number of emails flooding our inboxes for the program, just by managers saying, love it, I want to participate. We had other professionals say, I went through this exact scenario. I wish that I had a program like this when I restarted my career. I would have done it, a couple of years faster had I been able to even interview. So just sharing the background plus the success stories, I think generates a lot of awareness, and it helps people gravitate toward the program and support the program.
Yeah, and you're bringing up another reason that people take career breaks, a personal health issue. And also, we should emphasize that these career breaks are from 1 to over 20 years. And one of the things that we do at iRelaunch is feature career success stories, and we have a podcast where we talk about the longest relaunches. So we have people who took, who have the longest career breaks, people who took like 25 or 26, or even we have a 31-year career break, and how they return to work. And I think these stories are so powerful. So Alex, when Amazon made that announcement about going to 1,000, it was very significant because one of the topics that has been challenging, I think, for return to work programs until this point is scale. And so you made that announcement, and it was like a very strong statement on scale. So I wanted to know how you're thinking about that, and I know you've given examples of what populations you're looking at, but how you're anticipating that rolling out.
So it's rolling, and we're expanding to Europe as we speak. We're targeting other countries as well. But the comment around hiring 1,000 returners was really when our pilot program proved that this is a way to complement industry recruitment. It's not going to replace, but it will complement. And I don't know if you know this, but Amazon's hiring just a little bit. So if we can complement recruiting at all, then everybody gets on board. But the way we're thinking about it is really around fungible roles. So where there's no niche domain experience required, or specific technology like AI or ML, machine learning or artificial intelligence, where that's not required, because one, there's more professionals out there with that fungible experience, but two, we have more options in which to place them across the company because, again, we have to meet the candidates where they are. So if they're unwilling to relocate to Seattle, Washington because they've established roots when they, raise their family and they're located in New Jersey, guess what? That's where Audible is, and we can place them with Audible in a finance position or something like that. So fungible roles, more hiring locations, gives us more options.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I guess I'm interested in hearing from both of you your evolution as leaders of the programs and how the experience has changed for you personally.
That's a heavy way to end, Carol. It truly has. As someone who, my manager in my year-end review last year said I bleed J&J red, I truly believe in the organization and to help returners, come back to the workforce. As I mentioned, my husband's a stay-at-home dad. It really brings together the two things I love, the passion that I have for the community of folks that choose to take a career break or choose to do something different in their life, as well as an organization that's as impactful as Johnson & Johnson. And it really also allowed me to see the global impact we can make. I really didn't necessarily take into account how truly global this type of program is needed. And, we just launched our program, our second cohort in India last week with 8 hires, and just hearing those returners in their stories about they never thought they'd be able to do this, that it was something that they had just kind of brushed aside and thought their career was over. I mean, those types of personal impacts are tremendous, as well as hearing from the hiring managers on the other side. We got such great talent. I love Carrie so much. She's amazing. I can't wait to get another returner in our organization. Those are stories that you don't get in everyday job across your career. So for me, it is both that blend of the passion I have to allow folks to really have that journey that's unique to them. And I'm hoping that someday we won't have to have programs like this, that returners or folks taking career breaks will be seen just as capable and competent and have the confidence to come back to the workforce alongside peers that don't take career breaks.
I totally agree. I mean, the fact that we have to have the program right now is great, but long term, hopefully we don't have to. Similar to Liz, I feel good about what I'm doing professionally when our recruiters are telling us that candidates are literally crying tears of joy when they get the offer. That's very touching. When we have candidates that scream out of excitement and accidentally hang up on our recruiter when they get the offer, that makes you get out of bed in the morning. And then personally, the company has also seen the value of creating infrastructure like this, and so my role is now expanding to include other what they're calling alternative recruitment pipelines, and how can we establish a more programmatic way of engaging with the Department of Defense and hiring our heroes and other populations. So the company has really just seen the success and said, let's double down.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any advice to people in the audience who are thinking about launching a program at their company in terms of starting point?
Work with Carol.
No.
You didn't pay me to say that. No, start small, right? As I mentioned, trying a location or a leader that already has a passion for this, and say 1 or 2 roles. Let us try this out. Let us prove this concept to you is really important and helpful in our journey. As I mentioned, growing globally, I don't think we would have been able to make the impact if I said, okay, Brazil, we need 10 roles to kick this off. If you just say, give us 1 or 2 opportunities to see what it's like out there, what the market is, and demonstrate success through those candidates, I think that then success breeds success.
Yeah, plus one to what Liz was saying, I would also say don't reinvent the wheel. Use what's familiar with the business. Our program is nearly identical to student programs, university internships, and because it's familiar, it's easier to adopt. The hiring managers say, oh, I've had an intern before, got it, this is what the expectation is. And so, similarly, start small before you go big.
Great. Well, Liz and Alex, thank you so much. It's been so enlightening. And I just want to close by saying that career breaks are not going away. Almost 4 million women and men withdrew from the labor force during COVID, and studies are showing us that millennials are anticipating career breaks at rates we've never seen before. So the companies that have these programs in place are going to be best positioned to engage with these high caliber returning professionals when they're ready to return. So I just want to give those employers who are at that beginning point a resource that might be helpful. And I have this article coming out next week in Harvard Business Review talking about return to work programs, their evolution, the innovations, the best practices, and it would be a good starting point, and I hope employers find it to be a useful resource. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Alex, and thanks everyone for a terrific session.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.